Hello, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? I'm glad you agreed to come along with me, and I hope that you are too. Remember when I said that sometimes the hero's journey could involve a quest for a great treasure? Well, that's where we are right now at this stage of the Mass. To continue that wedding analogy, we've exchanged vows with God's love letters and the Creed, and now it's time for the wedding feast. The Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith. Lex orandi is lex credendi. The Church prays what it believes and believes what it prays. So we're about to scale that summit to find our source of hope, to find relationship, intimacy even with Christ, to quote St. John Paul II. It would be a fool's journey for me to think that I could uncover the treasure of the Eucharist in 10 sessions, much less 10 minutes. What I'm hoping to do is to cover some of those treasures of the Eucharist during our Lenten journey, which begins next month, knowing that even that's not enough. The Church teaches that it takes a lifetime to unpack the treasure, the mystery, what the Church calls the mystagogia of this gift. Keep in mind that we all have a role to play during the liturgy of the Eucharist. Full, active, and conscious participation is always the goal for Mass. Now, going back to the analogy of scaling a mountain to reach the treasure, think of a climbing party. There's climbers, guides, and the leader. They're all tied together so no one gets lost along the way. The leader's job isn't to drag the people up, but to lead the people up. In fact, if he must drag people up, no one will reach the top. So today, I'm only going to try to tackle some of the foundational teachings on the Eucharist. And I'll begin with the word itself. Eucharist comes from the Greek word Eucharistia, which means thanksgiving. In a very real sense, this is what we do each Sunday. Just like a few weeks ago, in November, we gather together as family. We share our stories, exchange news, and share a meal. Today we do this in a single celebration on a particular day. Now, this wasn't always the case. The first apostles were observant Jews. In fact, in recognizing Christ as the Messiah meant for them that they were more observant. So on the Jewish Sabbath, from Fridays at sundown through Saturdays, they would go to the synagogue for readings, teachings, and prayers. On the next day, Sunday, they would gather together to celebrate the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ with the celebration of the Last Supper. The sacrament of Eucharist is older than the Gospels. We've been celebrating the Eucharist for years before the first Gospel was ever written. Over time, Christians were no longer welcome in the synagogues, so the Church gathered on Sundays only. This is why there are two distinct parts to the Sunday Mass. There's another concept that we inherited from our older brothers and sisters, and that's the idea of time. And I'm about to take us to some deep grass here, so don't stress, we're about getting lost in the weeds. We won't stray too far from that trail. It's more of a pure preview about what's going to become later. Because God created time and space, He is not limited to time and space. This means that time isn't always linear from beginning to end. One way to look at it is that God is always the God of now. When the Jews begin celebrating the Passover, for example, with the Seder meal, the youngest person at the table begins with a question: why is this night different from all the other nights? Now, did you notice that? She didn't ask, why was that night different, but why is this night different? When the Jews celebrate the Passover, they're not so much remembering as much as reliving. They aren't recalling the Passover, they are experiencing the Passover. Now, the same holds true for us at Mass. We aren't so much remembering the Last Supper as we are at the Last Supper. Now, don't try to digest that concept all at once. Let it lay on fertile soil so it'll be absorbed when you're ready. Now, what's really cool right now is that quantum physicists are telling us and realizing that there's no physics or mathematical law that requires time to flow in only one direction. So let's get back to the trail. I want to talk to you about the real presence of God in the Eucharist. Now, I think that most, if not all, Catholics know the Church teaches that through consecration, the bread and wine becomes the real presence of God. Now, I wonder how many of us understand this mystery. Thomas Groome, a theology professor at Boston College, on the first day of his class, asked the students three questions. Question number one: how many of you believe that at Mass, the bread and wine becomes the real presence of Christ? Now, if you're at a Catholic university in a class on Catholic theology, you know what the right answer is, or at least the expected answer is. Every hand goes up. Then he asks another question. How many of you were at Mass yesterday? Now, this time only a few hands were raised. He then challenges them with this. If you truly believe that God was waiting for you to be in His presence, how could you not be there? Now, the mystery of this transformation is called transubstantiation, in case you ever take the Catholic SATs. Basically, the essence of the bread and the wine has become the body and blood of Christ. To be clear, if you were to put the host under a microscope, it would still look like bread, but its essence has changed. Just like if you were to put a lock of my hair under the microscope, it would look like hair cells. That slide is not my essence, my spirit, my ruach. It's here in me. Now, over the years, there have been Eucharistic miracles when the microscope would show molecular changes. I'm not discounting those at all, but they are as rare as they are spectacular. Sometimes when we hope or expect a spectacular miracle, we can be disappointed in the everyday miracles. The transubstantiation of the bread and wine is very cool, but there's an even deeper transubstantiation. Christ didn't institute the Eucharist to transform the bread and the wine alone. He instituted it so that we are transformed. When we eat this bread and drink this cup, we become the real presence of Christ. We become the tabernacle, and we're surrounded by living tabernacles. Yes, it's a mystery. But at least in theology, mystery doesn't mean unknowable. Mystery means that there's always more to know. So during Lent, we'll explore more. My name is Dave, and I'm not in charge.